It's hunting day, and the target is the son of General Kim Wongbong. But why are the Empire's soldiers hunting their own boss's son? Because the kid was born without mana in a world where everyone has magic. For a family obsessed with power, having such a weak son was a total disgrace, so his own dad ordered them to wipe the kid out. Lieutenant Jung was assigned to fight the boy, but the kid couldn't even hurt a fly, so Jung just drove his sword through his stomach and threw him off a cliff. A drop so high not even Deadpool would survive. At night the soldiers went to the spot to check if he really bit the dust. After hours of searching, they finally found the guy, and the scene left everyone's jaw on the floor. Because the kid had been thrown off a cliff the size of Everest, with a massive hole in his stomach, and still he was just sitting there chilling. What? Out of nowhere he started giving off a green energy. One of the soldiers freaked out and rushed at him. But the kid saw the strike coming, dodged it and punched the guy, leaving the whole platoon in shock. When the others drew their swords, the kid took 3 coins out of his pocket and threw them so hard that he pierced 3 skulls at once. The rest of the squad pushed their luck, but the kid who used to be useless was wrecking the elite troops. The last guy standing pulled out his gun and shot at his blind spot. The kid just dodged the bullet and even called him slow. He grabbed the lieutenant by the neck, and with a smile on his face he finished off the last enemy without taking a single scratch. But what happened to this kid? How did he fall off that cliff with no magic and suddenly turn into Broly? This is Kim Taiju, and what the soldiers didn't know is that during the fall his mind was pulled into another world where he bumped into an old man. The guy was Tangunok, the supreme poison demon. Such an insane master that he conquered his world by crushing everyone. When their minds connected, they shared their memories and found out they were the same person in parallel universes, except their lives were quite different. The old man became the most OP guy in his world, while the kid was his family's failure, and ended up murdered. Tang then passed down all his martial arts knowledge and the secret of QI, and sent the kid back to his body, ready to be the strongest in his own universe. When Tianzhou woke up, the first thing he did was grab a poisonous plant and swallow it down. He meditated and turned the poison into pure energy, focused on becoming the Tangun Ak of his world. That's why when the soldiers found him, he was sitting there meditating, giving off green energy. After wrecking all the soldiers, he only had one mission in mind, to wipe out everyone who wanted him dead. One of the squads returned to the base and told the general they found the lieutenant's troop completely wiped out and no sign of the kid's body. His dad was already losing his patience, but since in this world whoever has no mana dies, poisoned by the very air, he was sure the kid would kick the bucket anyway. But the general has no idea what's coming.
Kill that boy! Kill that boy!
A few days later, at the magical beast border zone of Mount Jiri, the protagonist stood admiring the view. From where he was, Guri was fully visible. When asked if it was the first time that he laid his eyes on this view, the young man confirmed that he was new here. The one with the mustache realized that the young man must not be quite knowledgeable about their city. In 2026, Guri was just a small city in Korea, until it joined the empire. Mount Jiri was a place filled with monsters that desperately needed extermination, which is why the emperor had made Guri a free city. This gave it many advantages, like low taxes on magical beast products and the allowance of crimes. By depriving the city of law, it quickly enriched it with awakeners that rushed to subjugate the magical beasts. And as the man continued babbling on about all of this, our hero urged him to just cut to the chase. In the end, the boss warned the protagonist about the many criminals that flooded their lawless city. Tau found the man to be quite the chatterbox, yet liked him as a person, and enjoyed his advice. A few days ago, Tau had survived an attempt made on his life. After that, he severed every one of his contacts following his discharge, and started to search for a place where he could gain power. And after some thinking, the free city turned out to be the perfect place for this. After all, since the empire doesn't have a huge grasp on the city, it would be hard for his family to learn about his location. To make things better, it was filled with all sorts of poisonous items that would greatly benefit him in his training. Tianzhu was still unfamiliar with martial arts. By some miracle, the hero that was at the door of death had met with his counterpart in the martial arts world, known as the Supreme Poisonous Demon. Our hero found it rather ironic that the woman who wanted to assassinate him ended up doing him a huge favor instead. As for now, Tianzhu, who was working as a porter in the mountains, decided to quietly acquire the necessary strength and funds in order to become fully independent. At that moment, the boss asked him about his opinion regarding the strongest in the party. The old man pointed him to the surprisingly young Li Henyul, who was a regular rank awakener. As a regular awakener, she would be one plane higher than the first lieutenant that our hero killed. Yet for some reason the lady was behaving oddly. All of a sudden, the awakener lost consciousness. And just like that, she crumbled to the ground after being bitten by a mutant 3-striped mosquito, leaving everyone in a panic. As for Taeju, he failed to see why this was such a big deal. At that moment, someone decided to handle the situation. The redhead with a magic staff channeled all of her power and cast a huge fireball spell. And just like that, a powerful explosion occurred, putting an end to the terror of the mosquito. When asked for the reason behind this panic, the boss explained that this insect had the power to temporarily make mana vanish. Some awakeners even fainted from the bite, and it was only natural for everyone to panic, as countless parties had seen their demise because of a single mosquito. In the memories of his martial artist alter ego, the protagonist started to remember a poison that was rather similar to the bite of the mosquito. For that reason, the hero decided to use this as an opportunity to examine the girl using a poison spirit art, and what he found left him particularly intrigued. One of the hunters started to shiver, as this area should be mosquito-free. For that reason, he turned to the team leader and claimed that it would be for the better to retreat, which the leader agreed with. Only then did something start to move in the tall grass. The leader was startled by this. For that reason, he asked his party to brace itself for battle. Yet, as it turned out, it was nothing but a long-tailed rabbit, a creature at the bottom of the food chain, and a good lab rat, as it reproduces at an insanely high speed. Upon seeing this, the entire team felt relieved. They quickly assumed that they had been scared for nothing. But little did they know, this was far from a false alarm. Before anyone could realize it, the team leader and the hunter next to him were quickly beheaded, and just like that, the party was left with 2 men down. The humans were now being attacked by orcs, fierce beasts that made their presence known with their powerful roars. Seeing this, the mage decided to buy her party some time by distracting the monsters. The boss turned to the protagonist. Taiju urged him not to wait for him, as he was going to stay here. The old man tried to argue that there was nothing porters like them could do here, but Taiju was determined to lend a helping hand. And just like that, the boss was handed the young swordswoman who had fainted. Taiju asked him to start running, and explained how he would be simply providing small amounts of help. With that being said, the man started to flee, while urging his friend to survive. Shortly after, our hero noticed that the movements of the monsters were oddly synchronized. Meanwhile, the mage was throwing her skills left and right in order to take care of the orcs. Only then did she notice one of them going for Taiju. Seeing this, she firmly planted her foot into the ground, and decided to stop the creature at once. With only a single fireball, the orc was taken care of. Taiju covered his nose, repulsed by the smell of burnt flesh. Only then did he notice something shocking. Taiju screamed at the lady to duck, and before she could even realize it, a blade was swung at her neck from behind. Meanwhile, in the celestial realm, at a calm lake radiating its serenity, the supreme poison demon, who entered this realm a month ago, started to think of how he would have still been stuck in his old realm if it hadn't been for our hero. Because of the memory link, the old man had acquired the knowledge present on planet Earth. This allowed him to reach enlightenment, and with that, his goal to reach a higher plane of existence was finally achieved. Even so, it was his mistake for not knowing any better, as in the end, this celestial realm turned out to be a fancy mental asylum. It was truly shocking to see it filled with all kinds of crazy people, and in the eyes of the poison demon, the sect founders and legendary masters weren't any different. Seeing how all of them lacked manners, the old man realized that it was a stupid idea to waste his life trying to reach enlightenment. Even so, he couldn't deny that the soul sharing he had with his younger counterpart was a rather enjoyable experience. Thus, the demon started to wonder about how his successor was doing. The two of them were the same person, yet because of their environments, one became a well-feared and respected master. As for the other, he was labeled as a reject, which is why the old man hoped that his abilities could help him improve his situation. In order to surpass the strongest in his world, Taiju needed to reach the 7th star of his new poison martial art. The old man started to fantasize about the moment he and his younger self would meet again, and about what he could teach him. But as he was deep in thought, something was suddenly thrown at him. It was none other than the sword immortal, who decided to pick on the poison demon for daring to mock swordsmanship despite being a dagger thrower. With that being said, the one who forwent enlightenment charged at the other old man with his knives in hand. Meanwhile, on Earth, as the orcs were being burned to a crisp, the lady noticed something alarming. Even so, she didn't have enough time to react to the incoming blade. Seeing her incompetence, the protagonist had no choice but to act, and so he decided to take charge of the situation. He started off by knocking her out. Taiju then launched himself forward. He decided to resort to the new AoE skill that he had learned. Just like that, a tempest of coins rained down on the battlefield as he used the flying dagger art, Dagger Burst. The huge orcs were quickly overwhelmed by the swift and lethal coins, and thus the projectiles bounced off their heads. And just like that, the martial artist finally landed on the ground. It was a pleasant surprise for him to see that it only took one hit to take care of a whole orc. Taiju started to wonder what to do about the mage whom he had knocked out by accident. Then again, he couldn't afford to let the news of someone unmarked wiping out a bunch of weak orcs go public, as it would put him under many watchful eyes, including his father's. For that reason, he decided to flee the area immediately. Taiju had to think about how the meeting with the old man had changed his life, as a mana reject would never usually worry about such things. The protagonist decided to leave no traces of himself behind. It was rather annoying to clean up after using his throwing skills, as the weapons needed to be carefully picked up, and projectile costs were always high. As the hero began to think about how he would acquire a retrieving skill after reaching the 7th star, he realized that he was missing a coin and began to look for it everywhere. After some time, he found it stuck in a tree, but as he reached out for it, he noticed an insect flying by. Taeju decided to act quickly, and so he quickly caught the mosquito in the palm of his hand. Seeing as this wasn't an area where mutant three-striped mosquitoes spawned, it was safe to say that this was the same bug that had bitten the Pro Awakener. Taeju then gently placed the insect on the palm of his hand. The poison of this creature temporarily scatters internal energy and disrupts the flow of mana inside Awakeners. Our hero immediately compared it to the energy-scattering poison of Murim. Yet, on Earth, humans had to use protective gear, since, unlike in Murim, they didn't have the antidote for this poison, making it quite dangerous. Uncovering the composition of the poison would allow our hero to create an antidote using the knowledge he had acquired from the old man. Then again, he would have to locate herbs in his world that were similar to the ones in the world of the old master. Taeju then decided to do the only logical thing and eat the insect in his hand. The young man quickly gobbled the mosquito up, casually swallowing it. His latest snack made him realize that the two poisons were identical, meaning that by finding the right ingredients, he could create a cure that would make him rich. With that being said, our protagonist decided to test this upon returning home. Only then was he attracted by an intriguing sound. Taeju was then startled by what he saw. He was now face to face with an elite orc that shouldn't have spawned in this area. And from the looks of it, the monster was craving blood. As the monster screamed that it wanted to exterminate humans, the protagonist was left baffled by its size, as well as its ability to speak. In any case, elite monsters could be considered the awakeners of magical beasts. To make things worse, no orc, especially no elite, should spawn in this area, meaning that something was happening on the mountain. With that being said, the orc started to swing his weapon. Taeju immediately dodged. The power of the strike caused great destruction. The old man was amazed by such firepower, and claimed it to be comparable to that of an expert rank monster. There was a high chance that none of his coins would be able to pierce the skin of the monster. Even so, he decided to give it a shot. Taeju immediately used his flying dagger art, Swift Strike. This allowed him to launch 3 coins at high speed towards the monster. His projectiles successfully connected with the target, only to stop instantly. Such a result wasn't surprising. The mightiest hidden weapon attack of the martial artist had no effect on the monster, and since his AoE technique would disperse the force even more, he began to think that the Bloodseal Poison Palm would be the best choice. At that moment, the creature let out a fierce roar. It was at this moment that Taeju realized he was hesitating. He was even certain that his past self would be ashamed of him if he discovered that he was doubting himself at the start of the fight. Taeju realized that he had grown prideful upon taking down the orc pack with ease. It didn't matter how fearsome the obstacle in front of him was, as he would keep trying until he succeeded. After all, this was the path of the supreme poison demon. And so, as the poison palm was unleashed, the elite monster raised himself to parry the attack. With that being said, his giant axe of steel clashed with the bare palm of our hero. Taeju was able to push himself to his limits, and just like that, a great explosion occurred. At the end of the clash, the giant axe was damaged, but only one of the fighters had his knees on the ground. Taeju was unable to even scratch the orc, and so, seeing this, he decided to keep on attacking until it fell. At that moment, a swift blade was drawn out. Suddenly, the elite orc suffered a million cuts. The human was left confused. Not even the monster itself realized what had just happened. And as it blew into bits, Taeju realized that its killer must be a master rank awakener, and that if it wasn't for the elite, he would have fled the scene long ago. Thus, he started to think of an excuse to give to his savior. At that moment, Taeju was asked if he was the orc's killer. The man claimed that since the hero was unmarked, he was a pathetic non-awakener that shouldn't have been able to triumph over the monsters. Taeju didn't know what to say in front of these cold eyes. The standing committee member Lee Young-hak, also known as the vigilante captain, who was the guildmaster of Nogodon, demanded answers. Taeju realized that such a presence, arrogance, and power could only belong to someone important, meaning that he had to carefully phrase his words. Yet, as he started to speak, he was quickly joined by the boss. But the middle-aged man wasn't concerned about him, and only worried about the luggage, which seemed to be safe according to its carrier. And as he pointed out how he had been saved by someone, the one with the beard turned to see who it was. The porter immediately recognized Lee Young-hak, who ordered his arriving forces to call in a cleanup team. The Free City answered to an autonomous committee, instead of the emperor, and the vigilante captain was a committee member with voting rights. He was also the Nogodon guildmaster, charged with security, as well as a master rank awakener, and as the boss pointed out how all porters paid his guild for protection, the guildmaster ordered him to shut up. The one with the beard apologized for being a chatterbox, and urged his colleague to thank his savior, which he immediately did. Li Yunsheng asked the young man if he truly had nothing to do with the orc massacre, seeing how he was a porter. Taeju confirmed this, and claimed that he had found himself alone with the elite monster after the mage who wiped out the orcs passed out from mana exhaustion. With that being said, the vigilante captain's men urged him to get going, seeing how they had secured the survivors and called the cleanup team. Li Yunsheng decided to move quickly, yet he seemed to have more to say. He advised the newcomer to his city to never cross him on a bad day or cause any trouble. He then left while laughing like a maniac, and affirming to our protagonist that he wouldn't show him the same mercy as today. Once the committee member left, the old boss was relieved, so he firmly asked his colleague never to upset the man who could make his life in this city impossible. Taiju tried to explain that Li Yunqing didn't seem that bad, only to learn that he was a corrupt officer who enjoyed bribery and let some crimes slide. In fact, all of his patrols were nothing but cover-ups, and if things weren't urgent, he wouldn't have asked for his help upon stumbling upon him in the woods. Since masters were basically walking nukes, the new porter was advised to avoid them and get his luggage down the mountain at once. Taiju was certain that he would have been in quite a pickle if the vigilante captain hadn't intervened. He then quickly realized that he had wasted an entire month after his soul sharing and had become arrogant after killing a few awakeners using abilities he got the easy way. Taiju, as he was, wouldn't even dare to look at his old counterpart. From that day on, he decided to take things more seriously and made an oath to become powerful. The free city of Gori had an almost perfect urban infrastructure. It cruelly lacked hospitals, as no good doctor would dare set foot in this dangerous place. Most of the medical helpers here were in fact a bunch of quacks running away from the law. For that reason, drugstores and pharmacies became incredibly abundant in the free city. For that reason, pharmacists had the power to write prescriptions and dispense drugs approved by the government or the autonomous committee. Some pharmacists even made a fortune out of this, as they were much more trustworthy than a random shady hospital. For that reason, the protagonist decided to sell his cure for the mutant three-striped mosquito. The last month was tiring for him, as he spent his days working as a porter, his spare time collecting herbs, and his nights training in martial arts. To make things worse, he was forced to reach the 3rd star of his martial arts, seeing how delicate the antidote preparation was. But due to that, he gained power, meaning that he wouldn't be easily taken down any longer. And if everything goes right, Taiju Kim might be able to earn himself a decent fortune. Upon entering the store, the customer was welcomed to Box Drugstore, as the worker at the counter offered to get him numerous products. Our hero revealed that he was there to see the owner. This caught the lady off guard. Taiju then revealed himself to be a seller rather than a buyer. The man in the back overheard all of this. He then took a deep breath. Bak Hongpyo, who was also the director of his own orphanage, then introduced himself as the CEO of this drugstore. Taiju immediately greeted him and explained how he was there to sell some of his homemade medicines. The old man was getting tired of this, as a new scammer knocked on his door every day. For that reason, he quickly turned down the offer and affirmed to the newcomer of the city that he needed to go to the labor market if he wanted to earn something. Yet, as soon as Taiju mentioned this to be a mosquito antidote, the owner was left intrigued. He even thought he had heard wrong. The protagonist clarified that this was a cure for the mutant three-striped mosquito. Just like that, he piqued the interest of Hongpyo. He clarified that this was an oral medicine that could be taken in advance. And as the young man pointed out how its effects lasted for about 10 hours, the old owner was particularly triggered. He was annoyed by the fact that the young man in front of him didn't even put any effort into making his scam believable. The medicine maker gave them 2 more bottles. He gave them his card and asked them to contact him if they changed their minds after testing them. Their deadline was midnight. Taiju left the scene while explaining how he would take his products to someone else if they didn't contact him by then. At that moment, everyone in the store was left speechless. They all saw him as some kind of madman. At that moment, the customer grabbed the bottle with interest. That was Park Jin-soo, the leader of his own raid team, a regular of the shop, and a drug enjoyer, who asked the owner if this was plausible. Hong Pyu looked at him with confusion at first. He explained that he couldn't tell him immediately. According to him, everything would be clear once the drug was tested. Hong Pyu wasn't expecting much, since not even the best companies of the empire were able to develop this cure, but the confidence of the seller intrigued him. The lady then urged the customer to put the bottle down, only for him to claim how they still needed to test it. The old owner turned around, horrified. He started to scream at his tall regular for carelessly consuming a shady drug that wasn't even tested. Yet, after getting it into his system, Jinsu declared that the bottle simply contained water. The owner was stunned. Since the regular had a lot of experience with potions, the owner asked if he didn't feel any kick from the drug in his hand. Yet, Jinsu affirmed once again in disappointment that he didn't feel anything from it, meaning that it was just simple water. With that said, he labeled the hero as a scammer and advised the old man to discard the remaining bottles. Even so, Hong Pyo still had his doubts that the protagonist was just one of his regular daily scammers. Having said that, the regular finished his shopping spree. He and his crew were going to catch frogs, and his little drug test had made him late to the party. Despite all of these products being quite expensive, the man decided to pay in full with cash. With his purchases complete, the regular bade the old owner farewell. Hong Pyo urged them to be careful, thinking about how Taiju was obviously a scammer, as no one could ever create an antidote for mosquito venom. Later that day, a fierce battle ensued. The white beasts were wreaking havoc everywhere. At that moment, shield reinforcement was activated. Jinsu was able to protect himself from the attack of the blade-tooth martens, which shouldn't have appeared in this area. At that moment, his ally firmly grabbed her blade and went for the kill. She told the team leader that they should flee at once, seeing how they now had a clear path. The warrior revealed that she had been bitten by a mosquito and that the paralysis would kick in soon. Her ally asked her to wait a little longer, as they would only be safe once the last marten he was handling was taken care of. Only then did he notice something horrifying. Mutant mosquitoes had appeared. If Jinso suffered any more bites, he would be overwhelmed by the venom and fall victim to its paralysis. If he collapsed on the ground, the entire team would be at the mercy of the wild. He began to fear that he truly had been poisoned as his shield was weakening, wondering what he did wrong since he had taken precautions regarding this bug-infested area. The entire party was caught off guard by the blade-tooth martens, which had appeared out of nowhere inside mutant frog territory. This surprise attack immediately took out the bug suits of the entire party. The team leader started to blame himself for this, as his carelessness and panic had led to him getting hit. At first, the party members who were bitten by the insects decided to retreat at once. Yet for some reason the mammals blocked their escape route, leaving them no choice but to fight. Jinso only needed a little bit more power to take down the last marten and survive. At that moment, the swordsman warned him about an incoming attack. Only then did the team leader notice something horrifying. The monster had landed a powerful attack. Its blade had managed to pierce his shield, and just like that, the barrier shattered. Yet for some reason, despite his skill being broken, Jinso didn't lose any strength or mana. It was at this moment that he realized what was happening. The antidote that he had consumed in the shop was in fact no scam. Realizing this, he decided to throw himself back into the battle. He firmly grasped his sword. The team leader began to think that if the antidote truly worked, victory wasn't impossible. Later that night, someone hurriedly entered the old owner's drugstore. Jinso rushed to talk with the owner. He inquired about the price of the mosquito antidote and demanded to buy the whole stock. Sometime later, at the market of the Free City, a blade-tooth marten that was said to be incredibly good for stamina was being sold for 5 million won. A little further away, someone was selling a custom-made crustacean magical beast armor for 50 million won. The boy, who grew up in the border city of Puju, had never set foot in such a big market and found it quite lively. Taejo had made the right choice by taking a day off. In order to create the mosquito antidote, he needed to reach the 3rd star. The medicine required precise control over internal energy in order to extract what was needed from the medicinal and poisonous herbs. However, because the hero had overworked, his poison essence had overloaded, meaning that he needed some time to digest all the poison. Putting that aside, he started to recall a meeting in a coffee shop. Hong Pyo had demanded to sign a contract to purchase every bottle of the antidote. From the looks of it, the homemade medicine seemed to be effective. The old owner confirmed this and explained how it would revolutionize hunting in the mountain, before apologizing for calling the hero a crazy quack. Hong Pyo then brushed this aside and asked how many bottles the young man had produced. Upon learning that there were 60,000 in stock, the old man asked what would happen once they sold out. So Taejo revealed that he would just make some more. With that, he was handed a contract where the official production cost was set at 10,000 won, so that they could be sold at 50,000 won, including everything else. Seeing how production only cost him 100 won per bottle, Taejo was quite pleased and pointed out that the stock would be sold for 3 billion won. Upon learning that the tax was only 10%, he couldn't be more pleased with the lawless city. Taejo then decided to change the deal and sell exclusively to Beck Drugstore with a 30% discount for a year, but the old man affirmed that this was too much. So the hero pointed out that the old man was an orphanage director. He added how, according to everyone, the old owner was practically a father to all the orphans in the city. Since the drugstore funded the orphanage, Taejo declared that this was his way of helping out in exchange for a workshop to manufacture the cure. Hong Pyo, overwhelmed by such kindness, assured the hero that he had the perfect place for him. With that being said, the deal was finally sealed. After securing the contract as well as a fat paycheck, the hero decided to go down to the famous market of the city in search of some gear. He started to look everywhere in search of anything decent. Only then did someone ask him if he wanted a weapon. When asked if he was talking to him, the man confirmed, claiming his shop was the best around town. The giant, jacked, bald man doing a JoJo pose even offered to give our hero a special discount. Seeing how handsome he was, Tianzhou felt repulsed and stated that he didn't want to buy anything. Grabbing him by the shoulder, the blacksmith insisted that the fresh meat come and visit his lonely workshop. The blacksmith appeared unremarkable and should be a passable craftsman at best, yet he was easily pushing around someone who had reached the 3rd star of martial arts. Thus he might as well be a hidden master craftsman. Later on in the shop, upon taking a look at the shields, swords, hammers, and daggers, the hero was asked his opinion regarding the collection. Seeing how impressed he was, the blacksmith affirmed once again that he was the best in the entire city. At that moment, the poison martial artist decided to use his powers. The blacksmith was true to his word, as contrary to what his appearance suggested, his products were immaculate. Seeing this, he decided to place an order for 100 of the weapons drawn on the paper. Upon taking a look at the willow leaf flying daggers, the blacksmith was intrigued by their small size and asked if they were for personal use. Baldy then explained that in order for the daggers to be efficient, they needed to be made out of mana steel. Taeju asked if he could complete his order. The man confirmed, but explained that it wouldn't be done immediately, seeing how he lacked materials. After careful calculation and adding the discount for the client's handsomeness, the blacksmith demanded 250 million won as a total price, with a 10% deposit. Such a high cost for 100 single-use weapons didn't come as a surprise to the hero, who decided to pay the entire price up front. With that being said, the blacksmith promised to send the first sample to the hero after it was finished, before bidding him farewell. Having taken care of his weapons, the protagonist now needed to find armor. Seeing how he needed clothes with enough pockets to carry all his hidden knives, he speculated that he needed a robe just like the old master. But upon picturing it, he realized that he would only make a fool out of himself, and decided to go with more modern attire. Yet, as he started to wonder what kind of attire he should get, someone suddenly approached him. Taeju was intrigued. The lady with fox ears handed him a flyer, claiming that Flame Boutique's new collection had just been released, and that they currently had coats on display. Taeju immediately realized that a leather coat would be the perfect substitute for a long robe. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, as the two of them were exploring the streets, the castle finally entered their view. The one with long hair found it rather ridiculous that there was a wall around the city in the present time. Her friend with short hair agreed, explaining that this was an exclusive place for important people that could only be reached by boat. The lady discussing the behavior of the rich class in this city was Jung Yun-hee, the heir of the Bakdu group, and a cadet at the military academy. The person beside her found her to be quite intimidating, and asked why she came all the way to this city for the sake of a fox leather coat. It was revealed that the coat was made with the fur of rare Siberian illusion foxes, giving it excellent defense, and making it ideal for both winter and summer. Upon hearing this, her orange-haired companion affirmed that this coat seemed worth wasting a day off for. Although it was revealed that her grandfather, the chairman, had lent her a black card, Yeon-hee declined, claiming that she was going to use her own money. At that moment, the train finally stopped at Guri Market. The passengers finally exited the vehicle. The cadet of the military academy told Secretary Kim that they shouldn't waste any time, and should go straight to the boutique. Meanwhile, back with our hero, he decided it would be better to have a leather coat instead of a robe. Later, upon entering the boutique, Tianguo explained that he had been handed a flyer outside. The secretary started to grow wary, thinking that the man was also after the coat. At that moment, the shop owner welcomed him into the Flame Boutique, only to realize that he looked quite familiar. Tianguo failed to recognize the woman in front of him, but she immediately recognized him as a porter. The lady clarified that they had been in the same party a month ago during the orc attack. Upon finally remembering the mage, the protagonist asked her the reason behind her presence there. The lady explained that this boutique was her main job, and acting as a mage was only a way to make extra cash, before stating that she had been looking all over for him. Hearing this, Tianguo decided to leave immediately, as he had previously given her the credit for killing the orcs in order to stay out of the spotlight. However, Tianguo was not fully prepared to face the truth once the lady awakened, so he decided to avoid her, fearing she might ask too many questions. Yet, as he was about to leave, he was suddenly stopped. The mage simply wanted to know if the porter was truly the one who had saved her. When the Nogodan asked if she had passed out after exhausting her mana, she decided to roll with it because her savior obviously had some secrets to keep. Tianguo tried to deny the allegations, but the lady started to tremble. She thanked him from the bottom of her heart, as it was because of him that she was able to recover the bodies of her team leader and her boyfriend. As she broke down in tears, the hero didn't know how to handle the situation. There was no denying that he had ended up saving her life, but his main purpose, which was to test his abilities, could be considered selfish. For that reason, he felt unworthy of the mage's gratitude. At that moment, the secretary started to yell at the seller for making her lady wait. The mage immediately apologized. Suddenly, she fell to her knees. Out of nowhere, the mage firmly apologized to the lady, claiming that she was now unable to sell her the coat. Tau was left particularly confused. The secretary burst out in anger and started screaming at her, complaining that after they had gone through all kinds of trouble and a long journey, they were now being denied at the moment of payment. The mage apologized once again and claimed that she truly wanted to sell them the most precious item in her shop, but she had found a better use for it. Even as she promised compensation for both the lady and the secretary, the cadet had heard enough. With that, she stopped the secretary from yelling any further. The lady decided to go on her way. As the secretary screamed about how irritating all of this was, the important lady affirmed that it wasn't such a big deal. As the two of them exited the shop, Tianj began to worry that he might have stirred up some unnecessary trouble. When the mage affirmed that she should be the one apologizing, Tianjiro asked her why she had decided to keep the coat. Hearing this, the lady pointed out that people must always tell him how bad he was at reading others. After all, he still didn't realize what was going on. The mage wanted to give him the expensive coat. Tianjiro had a hard time understanding. The mage simply wanted to return the favor of saving her life by giving him the silver fox leather coat. The hero immediately refused, claiming that he was acting out of selfishness back then and that saving her wasn't his main purpose. But the lady explained that she couldn't care less about his intentions, as at the end of the day he still saved her life. She claimed that if he wanted to pay her back, he needed to save more people so that no one would die in vain, just like her boyfriend. It was the first time that someone had been so thankful towards our hero. He had lived all of his life around bad people, yet because of the current situation, he found himself overwhelmed by a weird feeling. Even so, Tau didn't dislike this emotion at all, and so in the end he accepted the gift with gratitude. The mage was overjoyed by this and rushed to get his measurements. Meanwhile, in the Lost Soul realm, the old man found himself quite bored. The sword immortal, Dongbin Sonin, had nothing to do in this infinite retirement home. In his eyes, everyone dressed, acted and looked the exact same. Only one person was different from the rest. Despite also being from Murim, the supreme poison demon wasn't like anyone else. Having changed his hairstyle and made himself clothes from the other world, he had either succumbed to the madness of this realm or was just crazy to begin with. The sword immortal was so bored alone that he decided to ask the man to teach him how to make such attire, and with that, he finally made up his mind. In order to persuade the poison demon, he decided to give him a special gift, a fruit known as the heavenly peach of this realm. A little later, at the old owner's orphanage, on one of the lowest underground floors, something shady was happening behind a sealed door. After putting much effort into it, Taiju was met with positive results. At that moment, he received a call. It was none other than the old man, who had just learned that the manufacturing of the antidote was done. Hong Pyo was delighted by this, as his shelves were almost emptied out, which greatly surprised the protagonist. After the news of the new mosquito-repelling medicine became public, the store swarmed with all kinds of adventurers. To top it all off, some people, like the first tester of the product, were buying it in bulk. Taiju asked the owner to tell everyone that more bottles were on the way, and that each person could only buy 2 bottles at most. The old man agreed but expressed his worry about fake copycat drugs appearing at any time now. Even so, our hero didn't mind it. According to him, if they were copied, they just needed to create a new product, knowing full well that no one could make that cure without the poison spirit art. So, as the CEO was about to close the call, stating that he would limit the sales volume while waiting for the supply, Taiju asked for the packaging machine. And as he started to complain about how packaging the drug took more time than creating it, which was why he had been stuck in his lab for 7 days, he was promised one soon. Meanwhile, outside of the room, 2 orphans were debating whether the person inside was a ghost or a beggar that needed to be kicked out. The boy assured the girl that there weren't any ghosts in their secret base, and that it was just a homeless man who needed to be kicked out. A sudden movement then startled the kids. At that moment the door opened, and from it, an ominous presence emerged from the smoke. As soon as the shady-looking man spoke, the kids' hearts dropped to the floor. And just like that, the 2 of them ran for their lives from the ghost that smelled. Taiju, who had spent countless hours packaging the bottles, found the children to be rather rude for calling him names. The protagonist doubted that his smell was that horrible, despite not having taken a shower for 7 days. He remembered that he had a meeting with his old boss because one of his workers ran away, and that he might be late if he wasted time showering. Only then was he approached by someone. The person in question seemed to be a lady. She had heard from her father that our hero had signed a contract with him in order to work on some kind of antidote. The protagonist affirmed that he was Kim Taeju, and asked the woman in front of him about her identity. As it turned out, the lady was from the orphanage, and was named Baek Soyeon. She came here in order to check on the ghost that the kids had warned her about. Soyeon also wanted to deliver him a special package. Upon reading the label, Taeju realized that this was the prototype sent to him by the blacksmith, as he thanked the lady. With that being said, she urged him to stay on good terms with her father, and as she took her leave, Soyeon begged him to hit the showers before leaving the orphanage, and went on her way. Shortly after, his excitement got the best of him, as he decided to check the prototype of the flying daggers before showering. Upon opening the package, he found a note inside. It was a note from the blacksmith sassily asking him to let him know if the prototype needed any improvement. It was safe to say that our hero wasn't into such things, and thus he quickly ripped the note apart. The relieved Taeju decided to check one of the blades. He was quite pleased by it, as it was sharp and sturdy. Its balance was great, and its grip was pleasant. And so, seeing how excellent his weapons turned out to be, the young man began to look forward to the coat. He recalled how he was offered the expensive item for free, yet seeing how he had earned some cash, he decided to make the right choice and pay for it. Taeju then remembered that he was short on time, and rushed to hit the showers. A little later that day at the magical beast border zone on the mountain, the protagonist finally joined the rest of the party. He immediately greeted his old boss. The man welcomed him with open arms. Taeju apologized for being late, so the boss revealed that they had just arrived as well, before thanking him for coming on such short notice. But as our hero affirmed with the boss that he was only repaying him for the kindness that he had shown him, someone rude started to speak. That person was irritated that a simple porter was delaying their hunt and demanded him to apologize. That arrogant person was a beginner, known as Jong Won-jun, a member of the raiding team, who reminded the 2 of them that this was no social gathering. Taeju asked this man to be careful with his words, and affirmed that he had no reason to apologize. Being talked to as such by an unranked individual greatly irritated the sword user, as he felt the porter should simply submit to them and apologize. Taeju felt a burning desire to take the life of this annoyance, and understood why the first guy, who he was filling in for, ran away. At that moment it was explained to him that the penalty for breaking the contract was high, and he was urged to control himself to the maximum, as insults kept coming. Having lived his entire life being insulted, Taeju decided to play along and finally apologized. At that moment, the other party members asked the swordsman to stop wasting time, as they pointed out that he was truly about to slice the porter. With that being said, as the boss started to apologize to our hero, the team leader ordered everyone to move. Taeju was intrigued by the fact that they were going on a raid that required 15 people with just a party of 7. He decided to warn the party that despite it being trendy to cut off party members because of the mosquito antidote, they needed more people for this. The swordsman called out the porter for daring to talk back, but Tianwu affirmed that in case he was being endangered, he would not partake in the raid. At that moment the party member claimed that he had had enough of someone who was bound to die. This greatly intrigued our hero. Wanjun decided to take the life of the arrogant one at once. The team leader Kwon Dong-sok reminded his party member that they needed the porters, and threatened to kill Tio if he kept talking back. Wanjun claimed that the porters in the free city must live an easy life, as he had never seen one arrogant enough to question the numbers of a party. The team leader joked that if they kept insulting the porter he might run away, so the swordsman claimed that he would just kill him then. Tio couldn't take it any longer, and started to wonder if he should just kill these lowlifes instead of taking their insults, seeing how he was now strong enough. With that being said, the party leader asked all of the members to drink their antidote before going on their way. The boss then apologized to the hero for causing him so much trouble, so Tio affirmed that it was fine and asked if they would be okay with only 7 people. Today's hunting ground was the Blade Tooth Marten area, and because of the antidote, parties now needed fewer people and no more bug suits in order to proceed. The boss claimed that it was reassuring to have 2 beginners on their side, before handing our hero a bottle of the antidote. Tio accepted his own product with a smile, while thinking about how much good it had done. He started to recall how the mage told him that in order to pay her back, he simply needed to save more people from dying in vain. Yet even if his new abilities were saving countless lives by shielding them from the mosquitoes, they had also influenced him. Twice in a row, Tau didn't feel any hesitation while thinking about killing the party members. The main reason behind this was his connection to the supreme poison demon. That man wasn't the forgiving type at all, and would prioritize killing those who wronged him. Because of the soul sharing, our hero had acquired his venomous heart. Yet he wasn't against this, seeing how he was too powerless on his own to survive on Earth. Tau then asked the boss to stay near him, but the man tried to argue that despite their bad reputation, it would be safer for him to stick with an awakener. The hero affirmed that he was being serious about this, as he could feel some kind of dark presence deep in the forest. It was a ferocious monster that was directing its claws at them. One day in Murim, as the Zhuji clan was burning down, the one behind it all made his entrance. The old man on the ground found himself exhausted and injured. Zhuji Chon, the patriarch of the clan, screamed at Dangunuk for daring to cause them so much trouble. At that moment, the poisonous one started to laugh at the lightning demon. He even pointed out how the old man in front of him and the rest of his clan had been working in secret with the demonic cult. The patriarch screamed that this was a setup, seeing how they were one of the 5 great clans. Yet the one controlling the blades affirmed that all of the demonic followers were liars, before tossing him something. The old man was utterly horrified. The head of his son rolled at his feet. The poison demon claimed that this was what he deserved for daring to sacrifice civilians for the sake of creating the demonic blood pill. He then dared him to claim this to be a setup once again. The poison demon greatly despised people like the lightning demon, who sacrificed the weak for their own sake. At that moment, the old man tried to bargain for his life, promising intel on the heavenly demon in exchange. Even so, the young man couldn't overlook the fact that countless souls had died because of the sins of the lightning demon. For that reason, he decided to punish him at once, and just like that, a rain of poisonous blades was inflicted upon him. The counterpart of our hero deeply wanted to inflict the same punishment upon the heavenly demon as well. Back in the present time on Earth, the party members were relieved to see that hunting martens became light work, since they didn't have to worry about the mosquitoes. The swordsman was overjoyed by the overwhelming loot and called out the scaredy cat for doubting their success, claiming that he would always be a porter. Tigyo struggled to contain his rage, as the party only succeeded because of the antidote that he had created. At this point, he seriously started thinking about killing them. Yet in the end, he decided not to make such pesky opponents the first targets of his new throwing knives. Tigyo knew fully well that the party would have had a much harder time hunting the beasts if it weren't for his antidote. Even so, he greatly doubted their ability to handle what came next. Once more, the hero warned the boss about the incoming danger and urged him to stay close, but the man was particularly confused. Tigyo claimed that they would be facing a simple and famous challenge of this mountain, the attack of a magical beast. Upon seeing the creature, the boss started to tremble. All were left horrified at the appearance of a red-furred wolf. Yet Taegyo reassured the boss that they had nothing to fear and urged him to hold his backpack, leaving him particularly intrigued. This wolf was an opponent that would require a regular rancor to be dealt with, yet this wasn't the scariest part about them. As these animals moved as a group of 10, Wonjun was caught off guard by the appearance of the second wolf, and so he started swinging his sword in hopes of killing the creatures. But the wolf swiftly dodged the incoming blade. Seeing this, the swordsman started to panic and asked the team leader for his orders. Yet the team leader in question had already begun making his escape. As the girl with him screamed in panic, the despicable individual assured her that they would just stick to their regular plan. They would be throwing the porters in order to distract the wolves so they could safely escape. With that, the old boss started to panic and begged Taeju to come up with a solution. Our hero was more than happy to do so. He immediately threw his projectile, using the flying dagger art, single flash, and just like that, the dagger traveled at high speed, grazing the skull of the swordsman, as well as the face of the team leader. In the end, it finally got stuck in a rock, and just like that, screams of agony echoed throughout the forest. The boss was horrified by what he had seen. Taeju then called out the first for abandoning his own team, and the second for wanting to sacrifice the weakest members to save himself. There was nothing our hero despised more than cowards, who would throw away the weak for their own sakes. The swordsman and the team leader were still in pain, as they had lost their ears. Only then did Wonjun notice something absolutely stunning. One of the wolves had already dropped dead. The trembling boss asked the protagonist how he was able to slay the monster with a single strike. At that moment, the remaining red wolf decided to avenge its mate. Yet the martial artist wasn't having it. Angered, he threatened to end the life of the beast if it dared to move. Taeju then turned to the party and asked if this was normal for them. He wanted to know if they always sacrificed the weakest member when they found themselves in a perilous situation. Wonjun screamed that it was only natural for the less important to die for the sake of the awakeners. Taeju expected such a response. Thus he decided to give the party a taste of their own medicine. And just like that, he quickly relocated to a safe spot. Taeju then ordered them to fight. The one-eared men were left stunned. Since he had already killed the first wolf, he wanted the party to deal with the second one. The team leader claimed this to be utter nonsense and affirmed that Taeju would regret angering awakeners. He then started to scream at his horrified party member, who promised the hero a handsome reward if he helped them. And just like that, another knife was thrown at him. Taeju concluded that the tall one wasn't in need of his ears, as he didn't seem to understand words. The protagonist then reminded them that his job was to carry stuff, while theirs was to do all the fighting. He even started to criticize them, as they were much more confident while fighting the Martins. And just like that, he ordered them to fight. Taeju was pretty serious about this. With that, everyone was left shocked, especially the swordsman, who affirmed that they wouldn't comply with his demands. Yet Taeju warned that they couldn't afford to refuse with the red wolf on their hands. With that being said, the sword wielder asked his party members to hold the line, and just like that, he was slapped in the face. The paw of the creature was strong enough to knock his head clean off his shoulders. At that moment, the party leader promised to take the life of the porter. Yet, while cursing the sacrificial lamb, he failed to notice the wolf that was now beside him. And just like that, the upper half of the party leader was bitten off by the wolf. As the two remaining ladies decided to make a run for it, the creature immediately took care of one of them. And so, as only one party member remained, the merciless creature focused on its last prey. And just like that, it used its powerful jaws. It finished off the last of the party members. The creature then turned its gaze. After all, there was one more prey for it on the ground. The boss was getting worried, as the monster was looking at him like a snack. Taeju was left particularly annoyed, as he wanted to let the creature live if it had chosen to run away. After killing a bunch of nobodies, the wolf seemed to have grown cocky, despite having witnessed the power gap between it and the protagonist. With that, only one option remained. Taeju decided to take its life. With that being said, he channeled all of his power, and just like that, the blood seal poison palm was unleashed upon the creature. This caused a giant shockwave that reached the heavens. The boss was at a loss for words, as he didn't expect someone unawakened to be this powerful. At that moment he realized that back then, Taeju was the one who wiped out the orcs, and that he tried to hide himself by giving all of the credit to the mage. With that, the boss started to wonder what Taeju had in store for him, as he had witnessed the entire thing, and so he fell to his knees and begged for his life. Taeju reassured the boss that he had no intention of harming him. This came as a huge relief. When asked if he was injured, the man clarified that he was perfectly fine. Taeju then decided to ask the boss for a favor. From one menacing gaze, everything was clear. The shivering porter immediately realized that he must keep his mouth shut about what just happened. And with that being said, the two of them decided to exit the mountain. As for the corpses, they were left to rot in the sunlight. Taeju, who already recalled his fight with the first lieutenant, began to think of how the beasts would eat the corpses and how his consciousness was clear. In fact, neither he nor his martial arts master counterpart could tolerate those who sacrificed the weak for their own sakes. He couldn't help but compare such low individuals to those of the Zhuge clan. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of UJ Pharmacy at the castle of Guri, A meeting was held in the conference room. Those inside were scandalized by the fact that sales had dropped by 50%. They started to blame Tizhou and Hong Pio for this, as everyone was attracted to the Bake drugstore because of the mosquito cure. The fat one screamed that they had turned a blind eye to this for too long, and that they should have crushed their small rival a long time ago. Oh Bambok, the president of Saijipyeong, reminded them that despite owning most pharmacies in the city, with Chanwang owning the rest, Bake was the only one not to submit. President Lee Gil-ho from Gurjnuri drugstore blamed the committee for protecting Hong Pio simply because he owns the orphanage. Nambok told his fat friend that he should try to think of a solution instead of complaining, which almost sparked a dispute. At that moment, Jo Hoon-sok, the representative of UJ Pharmacy, calmed down the two men who always argued with each other. He stated that they should work together and show honesty, starting off by admitting that his group had met with failure. From the looks of it, every major company had failed to copy the cure manufactured by the protagonist. Even so, Nambok was certain that his company would be able to create the antidote with time. His colleague screamed that he couldn't care less and affirmed that they needed an immediate solution in order to avoid bankruptcy. With that being said, the representative of UJ affirmed that their hands were tied, and that despite being worried about the committee, they should proceed as usual. The fat one expected that much from his friend, and asked him if he was done with the investigation. The representative decided to share his intel. They were able to discover that the antidote's creator was a 29-year-old discharged officer and the eldest son of Brigadier General Kim Ung-bong of Paju. Nam Bok was displeased with this intel, as it meant that the protagonist wasn't to be messed with, since he was the son of a master. Yet, Hoon-sok affirmed that this was simply the tip of the iceberg. Based on their intel, Taeju was a mana reject, who became a soldier after being kicked out of his home, and his father had a Japanese wife who wanted him dead, and had 2 sons of her own. The fat one immediately theorized that the protagonist had run away from his family. Hoon-sok confirmed this and decided to go meet Taeju, in order to give him an even more lucrative offer than Baek Hong Pyo's, and in case of refusal, they would simply adopt their regular bloody ways. Later that day, at the Magical Beast Defense Corps of the Imperial Army in Mount Jiri, someone knocked on the commander's door. The man in charge wanted to know if his intel had arrived. The officer confirmed, claiming that this info was given to them by the Autonomy Committee of the Free City. After learning about the personal information of our hero, the commander realized that he was the mana reject son of General Kim. In the past, the military asked for a supply contract that was rejected by the Free City, but since the manufacturer was a soldier, they might still have a chance. By acquiring the antidote, the military could start a huge subjugation operation before the magical beast wave. The master-ranked Lieutenant General Oh In-shing, thinking that things would be easy since a father and son are still close, demanded a meeting with General Kim at once. The next day, at our hero's hometown, inside his father's office, the general finally hung up the phone. With that being said, he took a deep breath. His wife expressed how surprised she was to see Taejuo become so important when he was once too weak for even college. With that, she rushed to book tickets to the Free City, claiming that they needed to help the newly rich young man, as he could very easily fall for a scam. Yet, he urged her not to bother him. The father wanted nothing to do with the black sheep of the family, who had been removed from the family register. His angry wife reminded him that regardless of the register, the two of them were still bonded by blood and should help each other. And yet, as he appealed to her conscience, she realized that he was aware of her assassination request. She started to tremble but reassured herself that there was no proof of it, as the first lieutenant was already dead. She screamed at her husband to ask his son for the military antidote, as it would greatly help him with his promotion evaluation. She affirmed that her family's territory could no longer support them, and that the general also needed to think about the tuition of his 2 other sons. And so for that reason, General Kim asked her to go see her stepson herself. He reminded her that his intentions were clear. With that being said, the wife was left frustrated. And just like that, she left the room, claiming that she would do her own thing, before violently slamming the door behind her. The general was finally alone. His son, whom he had presumed to be dead after months of disappearance, turned out to be living quite the life in the Free City. In fact, the father was glad to see that his son was spending the rest of his days happily. Meanwhile, at the lively market of the Free City, inside of the Flame Boutique, from among countless expensive suits that looked alike, the protagonist was given an attire like no other. The mage affirmed that it suited him very well. Taeju was particularly pleased with this excellent coat made from magical beast leather. It wasn't heavy, had good defensive stats as well as good temperature control, and its color was also perfect. To top it all off, the mage had given him the many pockets that he had requested. The lady who had found this request odd finally understood its meaning, seeing how Taeju used many weapons, and asked him if he was also a hunter. Taeju decided to pay for his 3.4 billion won new coat, but the mage affirmed that she was simply paying back his kindness. Our hero pointed out how the lady must have been quite embarrassed because of him, as this gift was already meant for someone else. But the mage reassured him that she had already compensated the customer in question. Taeju took a brief moment to think. With his mind made up, he decided to ask for several other products. His goal was to help the lady's business while acquiring multiple gifts for the orphans. The mage had no choice but to agree, and asked him to wait while she packed everything up. It was rather refreshing for her to deal with a good person for once, instead of the average, irritating awakener. At that moment, someone else entered the boutique. A mysterious man rushed to greet our hero, claiming that he had been searching for him. He then quietly approached him. Jo Hoon-sok introduced himself as the CEO of UJ Pharmacy. At that moment, Tianju stood wary of the man. The CEO quickly realized that this unexpected visit had gotten on the protagonist's nerves. The young man affirmed that this was the case and asked the CEO how he was able to find him. Hoon-sok clarified that the Pharmacy Association knew everything in the Free City. With that being said, he decided to cut straight to the chase. Jo Hoon-sok demanded that the hero sell them the mosquito antidote. Tianju couldn't help but feel like he was being threatened. The CEO affirmed that he was simply asking for a favor, which our hero immediately declined. Hoon-sok even offered him all of the means to break the contract with Baekongpyo. Yet Tianju affirmed that he had already given his word. When asked to sell the formula for 5 billion won, our hero clarified that he would never sell it so cheaply. The CEO was starting to lose his patience. He clarified to the young man that upsetting him wouldn't make his life in the Free City any easier, but the martial artist couldn't care less as he dismissed the man. At that moment, the lady came out, thinking that a customer had entered, so Tianju explained that this was nothing but a beggar whom he had sent away. Once outside, Jo Hoon-sok decided to make the protagonist swallow his words, and so he immediately made a phone call and urged his people to start the regular operation. Later that day, at the border of the Free City where the protagonist's mansion was being constructed, he was seen carrying many bags. He finally arrived at this location. The old owner was intrigued after seeing him carrying so much. Taiju explained how he had bought the orphans some clothes as a way of expressing his appreciation to their director. At that moment, the old man started to cry. He was overwhelmed by the hero's kindness to the point where he promised to become an even better person. Taiju was pleased by this reaction. He was also thankful to Hong Pyo, as because of him, the construction of his mansion had been running smoothly. And as he pointed out that he wanted to accept his proposal, the old man asked him if he was certain about it. Taiju declared that he had made up his mind after receiving a visit from Jo Hoon-sok. This greatly angered the director, who was worried that the CEO had harmed the protagonist. Taiju reassured him that he was simply threatened, and explained how this interaction reminded him of how people treat the powerless. For that reason, he decided to take the advice of the old man and create his own pharmaceutical company, urging the old boss to keep helping him. Taiju then asked the old man to keep up the good work with the construction until he came back. While waiting for his new company to see the light of day, the hero declared that he wanted to go and create new drugs. Yet, on the inside, he was particularly annoyed by the fact that no one had noticed his expensive new coat. The Chaos Form Poison Spirit art was developed by the Supreme Poisonous Demon, the strongest warrior in all of Murim. It was a mix of the traditional techniques of his clan, as well as the 5 elements Qi cultivation, with a little inspiration from other martial arts. It was divided into 10 stars, with each level allowing the user to acquire a new ability. After acquiring 10 stars, one would need enlightenment in order to get the poison spirit, which was the key to the secret technique. 10,000 torrential petal rain. This technique allowed the poison demon to take down the heavenly demon, who was the head of his demonic cult. Back on Earth, in the magical beast outbreak zone, a powerful shockwave had occurred. A fight between man and beast had broken out. The poison user took a deep breath. He firmly grasped his knife before planting it into the skull of his opponent. And just like that, the giant monster was taken down. Tianju was able to achieve a crushing victory. He didn't expect something called the Poison Claw Lynx to be this big. Because of its tough skin, Tianju had a hard time fighting it with his internal energy and weapons. He was currently at the 3rd star, and between a 1st and 2nd-rate warrior, which was a pitiful state of power, and the reason why he needed to consume the poison of monsters. Tianju stumbled upon a large poisonous gem, and began to think of how cultivation was an easy task with the knowledge of the old martial artist. Seeing how he had all of this knowledge on his side, it would be easy for our protagonist to achieve quick growth. At first his body was unable to handle a lot of poison, yet seeing how it had now stabilized, he was finally ready to surpass the 3rd star. For that reason, he started to fantasize about the poison of the spore poison water deer. Only then did he snap back to reality, and realize that he must recover his very expensive throwing knives. The spore poison water deer was a peaceful creature that didn't attack humans. It had 2 humps on its back, making it comparable to a camel. In the blink of an eye, Tianju decapitated the poor creature without giving it a second thought. The most terrifying thing about this creature was the fact that its humps exploded once it died. With that, its microscopic toxic spores were released into the air. Just like that, the hero found himself surrounded by countless poisonous bubbles. This poison was powerful enough to melt gas masks, and needed 60 minutes before dissipating naturally. After careful examination, the hero decided to absorb the poison at once, as it was the strongest he had ever seen. And so it began. Tianju started to use his power in order to absorb the poison. He tried his best to concentrate. His goal was to focus all of the poison energy. By doing so, he would be able to absorb it. If the protagonist managed to succeed in absorbing all of the poison, he would finally be able to reach the next star. Later that day, after countless hours of chi circulation, the hero began to think that he might have absorbed too much of the deer poison, as he had spent a lot of time turning it into internal energy. Since Earth had a better poison diversity than the Martial world, our hero was assured a quick growth. He refused to experience weakness once again. In fact, he didn't want to bow in front of anyone any longer. With that, after countless hours of hard labor, Taiju Kim finally achieved the 4th star. With that being said, he finally got up. His trip to the mountain was longer than expected. Yes, he was able to grow stronger, and even found an antidote to the poison of the water deer. Thus, Taiju decided to go back home. Seeing how he was worried about the YJ pharmacy, he didn't want to waste any more time. That night, at the drugstore of the old owner, the hero finally placed his backpack down. Taiju then rushed to greet the old man. He assumed that things must be going very well, seeing how the shelves were empty. Bike expressed how worried he was, as the protagonist had been unreachable for 15 days straight. The worried receptionist also welcomed him back. Taiju apologized, and explained that he needed to focus on training and research before asking about the problem at hand. It turned out that many pharmaceutical companies had taken their items off their shelves and didn't want to supply more. To make things worse, the Autonomy Committee's Drug Approval Department asked for the ingredient list of the antidote in order to check for side effects. Taiju immediately realized that Jo Hoon-sok was behind all of this. The owner explained that this was the CEO's favorite hunting method, and revealed to the hero how he was the general emperor of the committee. On top of that, refusing to provide the ingredient list would result in the item being forbidden to sell. After careful reasoning, Taiju realized that the enemy must still have more trouble in store for them. The low-life individuals were acting just as he had expected, which is why the hero decided to take the enemy by surprise. Thus, Taiju proposed to Hong Pyo to double down on the threat of the committee, but the owner didn't quite understand what he meant. Our protagonist claimed that they should stop selling their product, seeing how it was rumored to have side effects on the consumers. Throughout that night at the orphanage, smoke was rising through the air, and meat was being cooked. The entire orphanage, along with their guest of honor, was having a little barbecue. After taking the first bite, Taiju was left completely stunned. The meat that he had just tasted was absolutely heavenly. The taste of the spotted poison water deer was considered to be the best in the whole empire. Taiju quickly realized that the rumors about the emperor gathering all the carcasses of the deer that could be purified from poison were actually true. The fact that he had prepared the antidote against this poison was the best choice he had ever made. At first, our hero simply wanted to protect the civilians from the poison of the deer, in case of a magical beast wave, but things were now different. It was safe to say that this delicious food was addictive, which made the protagonist speculate that he should launch a deer meat business. He started to fantasize about how the emperor, renowned for his grandmaster swordsmanship, would become his #1 customer, as he was addicted to the meat. At that moment, the director decided to say a few words. Hong Pyo thanked the protagonist for giving them such a delicious treat. He even praised him for having created an antidote for the water deer poison. Even so, the man expressed his worry about them closing the pharmacy for a long time. Yet, Taiju explained that this was for the better. Only time would reveal the result, and show who would truly suffer the most from them, not selling the antidote. On a random day of the week, Jinsu was particularly annoyed, as the pharmacy had been closed for 5 days straight, and he was about to run out of antidote bottles. Some people started to speculate that the rumors about the antidote having some serious side effects were true, claiming that it forced the old owner to close his shop. After hearing this, the beta tester was left particularly annoyed, seeing how these two were gossiping just for the sake of it. Yet, as soon as he tried to intervene, someone quickly stopped him. Li Yunsheng was there to maintain order. The sight of the vigilante captain started to gather a crowd, who gossiped about the YJ pharmacy being related to the committee. The captain asked everyone to keep walking before explaining that the committee decided to ban the sale of the antidote until they could check the formula for side effects. At that moment, the beta tester started to scream that there were no side effects and that without the antidote, they needed to use the bug-proof suits once again. As the complaints of the public became louder and louder, the vigilante captain couldn't help but smirk. He was annoyed by the fact that someone beneath him had the nerve to actually talk back, but in the end, he decided not to waste his blade on them, and began to think about how annoying it was that the administrative officer was making him do this. And so, as everyone went on their way, the one and only loyal customer decided to stand his ground. Seeing this, the vigilante captain asked him if he had the power to back up his arrogance, and just like that, Jinsu fled the scene. The captain couldn't care less about the medicine, yet he wanted to get his hands on Jo Hoon-sok, who manipulated the committee. Meanwhile, watching from afar on the phone with the administrative officer, Jo Hoon-sok expressed how happy he was to see that the officer had forced the vigilante captain to do his bidding for him. The administrative officer explained that because of him and the chairman, the third standing committee member would always be outvoted. Noting that Lee Yoon-haek only steps in for extreme situations, the CEO explained that they had already started the second phase of the plan. He promised the administrative officer a huge reward and claimed that unless they acquired money by a miracle, the enemy wouldn't last much longer. Meanwhile, in the office of Lieutenant General Oh Jin-hyung, negotiations were being held. Taeju decided to give 1 million bottles to the Magical Beast Defense Corps at market price. The Lieutenant General paused for a second, and as he pointed out the extremely high price, Taeju became worried that he had upset the man by demanding the market price from the military. Yet, to his utmost shock, the officer beside him claimed that his commander seemed very pleased by this. As the Lieutenant General claimed that Taeju was selling his product for a rather low price, the young man was left particularly confused. Upon confirming that they had the necessary funds, the commander demanded that half of the money be immediately given to the hero as a down payment. Yet Tianhe's had one more product to demonstrate. Tianhe's wanted to create his own company, had been able to come up with a new product. The young man then unveiled the package and urged the commander to try it out. The master was left particularly confused, as he didn't expect to receive meat that was cooked exclusively for him. The Lieutenant General explained how he had been avoiding meat recently for the sake of his health. Tianhe's urged him to give this meat to the emperor. In that case, seeing how it was spore-poisoned water deer meat, the other officer in the room was left greatly stunned, as this meat was known to have a texture like no other. The protagonist nodded in confirmation. Seeing how capable the young man in front of him was, the commander offered him the chance to rejoin the army. These simple words were enough to trigger the killer instinct of our hero. The Magical Beast Defense Corps of Mount Jiri exists as an order of the Empire. Its mission is to fight magical beast waves and control their numbers, which is why upon arriving, the commander felt burdened, as a heavy duty was placed on his shoulders. Yet then again, he had finally found a way to save himself. The Lieutenant General couldn't help but think about the water deer cure. At that moment, his subordinate informed him that the payment they had promised the hero was successful, and that his orders were being carried out smoothly. The commander had already predicted that because of Jo Hoon-sok, Taeju would turn to them, and he was informed about a hunt for water deer, scheduled for the next day. With that, the master asked his subordinate to keep an eye on the drug maker and provide assistance if needed. The general then praised the adjutant, who despite having no connections, always showed impeccable results. The man felt glad, as he was finally being recognized by his superior. At that moment, the commander raised his voice and placed his hand on the shoulder of his subordinate. The general couldn't help but cry as he urged the adjutant to rise with him through the ranks until they reached the emperor. And just like that, the two of them began to chant the name of our protagonist. Meanwhile, at the newly built-up Kim residence, the owner was talking about how he wasn't encountering any problems in creating his company. The old man offered to handle all of the paperwork. Soon after, our hero picked a name for it. Taeju was extremely happy that he had successfully signed the contract with the military and that they had received great support from the Lieutenant General. The commander seemed to be worthy of his position, as he swiftly made it known to the public that he had signed an exclusive contract with our protagonist. Bak Hong-pyo then explained how he had used the 25 billion down payment from the military in order to repay their loan, but he also clarified that he closed his accounts in this particular bank, seeing how much trouble they had caused him. Taeju claimed this to be the right call and urged him to use the rest of the money for the sake of the orphanage. He then clarified that after thinking about it, running a company on his own would be quite challenging, so he declared that he needed a trustworthy partner, and just like that, he offered the old pharmacist the chance to become the co-owner of his company. The orphanage director doubted that he could fill such big shoes, as his skills only extended to a small pharmacy, but the hero thought otherwise. Taeju was a drug genius, yet when it came to the world of business, he was completely ignorant, which is why he needed help. Hong-pyo didn't expect his benefactor to see him as a reliable partner, which is why, in the end, he agreed. Yet the old man insisted on getting only 10% of the profits, but the hero refused. Since his partner would be in charge of the operations alone, he insisted on him getting at least 30% of the shares. In the end, Hong-pyo agreed, but claimed that he wouldn't be the one running things, as he had someone much more fit for the position in mind. The old man was referring to Baek So-yeon, whom our hero had once met in the bunker of the orphanage. According to him, she was his smartest child, which is why he would reach out to her at once. Hong-pyo had been the orphanage director for 2 decades, meaning that he was connected to many members of society with different professions, making him powerful. And because of that, the hero became certain that it was the right call to make him his co-owner. Taeju then suggested combining their names in order to name the company, and came up with Taehong Bio. At that moment, the old man declared that he had reached out to some of his oldest kids who became awakeners. This greatly confused the hero. According to the old man, the CEO of Yaej Pharmacy was an evil man, which is why Taeju was in need of bodyguards. The young man declared that he didn't need protection, and urged his bodyguards to go shield their home. This greatly surprised the old man, as it seemed like his partner had something up his sleeve. Even so, it was safe to say that the protagonist, free of markings, wasn't a powerful awakener, meaning that he was probably relying on his experience as a soldier. At that moment, the hero noticed the look in his eyes. As his concern was mistaken for a lack of trust, Hong-pyo affirmed that this wasn't the case. With that being said, the hero decided to adopt a different method. He demanded that the orphanage director call all of the bodyguards at once. Taiju wanted to prove his power and test out the antidote against the deer poison, and the best way to do that was to go on a hunting trip with them. Later that day, in the magical beast border zone, the party started to progress through the forest. Some of the orphans began to admire the very expensive coat of the drug maker, as well as his fine gear, yet even so they were worried about him, thinking that he was weak. With that, one of them tapped their new boss on the shoulder. The 25-year-old Baek Chang-hoon, who was a user rank, decided to walk up front as they would be entering Magic Beast territory in order to ensure his safety. Taichu asked to be referred to as Hyungnim, a term that refers to someone not much older than the Awakener. The swordsman then explained how, despite its good stats, the coat might get in the way, and how as a user, he was a better fighter than the protagonist. Thinking that he had overstepped, the orphan immediately apologized. Taichu clarified that he understood his concern, seeing how he was unmarked, yet he proposed to leave the discussion until after they dealt with the problem on their hands. This intrigued the swordsman. Only then did he notice countless eyes opening above his head. The Awakeners began to tremble upon spotting the Storm Martens, and just like that, the beasts launched their attack. In the face of danger, the bodyguards braced themselves for combat. Chang-hoon didn't expect the monsters to appear so soon. With that being said, the drug maker decided to make his move. Out of his pockets he pulled out a bunch of nails, as well as some golf balls. The hero then braced himself, and unleashed all of them at once. This was his technique, Dagger Burst. His bodyguard was left particularly stunned. Despite being weak, since they move in large packs, Storm Martens were to be taken seriously. Yet something unbelievable was happening to these creatures that would strike fear into the heart of a user rank. They had been totally disintegrated. To top it all off, Corporate didn't even break a sweat. The hero found himself quite annoyed with this swarm. According to him, it was so pitiful that it died before he could even use his daggers on it. Taeju couldn't afford to hurt the children of the previous owner. In order to quickly deal with the enemy, he used hidden weapons known as torrential rain, pure blossom needles, and iron pellets. The main issue for our hero was the fact that these weapons were irretrievable, meaning his wallet was going to take a good hit. Taeju was eager to reach the 7th star in order to finally acquire the retrieval skill. At that moment, the young swordsman approached our hero and asked him if he was one of those masters who could hide their marks. Taeju clarified that he wasn't an awakener to begin with, and that he would take the lead. Chang-hoon tried to argue that he was tasked with his protection, but as Taeju effortlessly took the lead, the young man started to wonder who he truly was. Later on, after walking into the tall grass, the prey was finally in sight. A water deer was spotted. Chang-hoon started to panic and asked the protagonist about his plan. Taeju then pointed out how the deer thought itself to be untouchable because of its poison. He then asked everyone to take the medicine so they could start hunting. Even so, the orphans had their doubts. After all, this medicine was still in the testing phase. Then again, the orphans needed to support their father, and had already seen the power and genius of the drug maker. Having considered this, they decided to showcase their trust in him. Chang-hoon decided to charge in first, asking his siblings to use the mana gun in case the prey tried to escape. With that decided, the swordsman pulled out his blade. He charged headfirst at the monster. Upon spotting the danger, the water deer started to scream. The creature was so loud that even the awakeners could barely hold their ground against its screech. Even so, the swordsman managed to escape the brunt of it by jumping into the air. From above he unleashed his skill, bisection slash. Chang-hoon successfully beheaded the monster. The orphans stood on their guard as the spores were about to be released. Right on cue, the bubble on the back of the deer finally burst. The extremely poisonous spores were then released into the air. Taeju, who had his doubts at first, was extremely pleased with the results. The antidote was a success, and the gutsy young man with little potential seemed promising as well. The orphans were overjoyed that the poison wasn't affecting them. Chang-hoon felt relieved by the success of the antidote. The protagonist affirmed that his point had been proven, and that, without its poison, the water deer was no threat. While some of the happy orphans apologized for doubting him, others claimed they had always believed in him. With the danger past, the hero decided to resume the hunt. Before moving on, however, he asked his bodyguard to take the deer meat with them, noting that once the antidote became public, the species would be hunted to extinction. Meanwhile, in New Seoul, located in the former region of Manchuria, at the MG headquarters, the employees were as busy as ever. At that moment, someone approached Manager Baek. 30-year-old Seyeon, the youngest manager in the strategic planning department, answered the deputy head with a smile. The man, known as Jeon Joo-hak, decided to cut straight to the chase, and asked the girl if she was truly an orphan raised by Hompok. She confirmed this, intrigued by the fact that her father had been brought up. The deputy head, pleased to hear this, urged her to postpone all of her current projects. This surprised the young manager. Jeon Joo-hak wanted her to return to her hometown to do him a favor. She didn't quite understand what he meant. The deputy head then pointed out how the creation of the company known as Taehong Bio was all over the news. Intrigued by his sudden behavior, she explained that she had read about this company creating the antidote for water deer poison. What she didn't know, however, was that her own father was the co-owner of this new company. The deputy head, acting on behalf of his powerful superiors, wanted her to go back to her father and get her hands on the antidote's formula. In exchange for doing so, she was promised a generous reward. Seiyun was annoyed that she was being asked to betray the orphanage director, but just as she was about to speak up, her phone started to ring. Seeing that it was her father, she asked for a quick moment to talk to him. Hongbyo started to talk with his daughter. The deputy head was eagerly waiting for her to end the call. In the end, the lady bid her father farewell with a smile. With that said, he asked for her final decision. Seiyun had decided to go back to her hometown. At first this seemed like pleasant news for the balding man. Then, all of a sudden, she threw her badge at him. The youngest manager in the company decided to quit her job. She had grown sick of seeing someone as short as the deputy head trying to step on other people. With that done, she made her exit, flipping off her old boss who was screaming at her in anger. Later that night, inside the building owned by our protagonist, the orphans were working hard. Taeju praised them for their hard work. He then asked them to go back to the orphanage and let him take care of the rest. Chong-hoon was left worried and tried to argue that his father had ordered them to escort the drug creator at all times. But Taeju demonstrated that he didn't need protection and urged the bodyguards to go back to the orphanage and protect it. Thus, Taeju began to think of how unlikely it was for someone to try and harm the only orphanage in this city out of fear of public backlash. Then again, there were many madmen among the sons of Adam, and the Free City seemed to have a lot of them. For that reason, Tianju needed trustworthy allies like the orphans. After establishing the company and acquiring the necessary staff to process the ingredients of the antidote, Tianju would finally be free to create new drugs. At first, he simply wanted to save money for himself, yet now things were different. Tianju had nothing against having a generous income. After all, if it weren't for that, he wouldn't be able to afford such a luxurious apartment. He felt weird stepping into his own home for the first time. The protagonist then hung up his coat. He, who thought that he would perish in Peju, struggled to remain alive after an attempt was made on his life. After the soul-sharing experience that he had with his martial artist counterpart, he went to live in the Free City as a porter before creating his first antidote. Yet, the biggest blessing at hand was the kind people he met. Taeju had gotten himself into many adventures in such a short time. In his eyes, the Free City was simply the first step toward achieving his own independence. Later on that night, the beginner-rank villain syndicate boss Ma Sang-shik stepped onto our hero's property with his subordinate. He felt jealous of the protagonist, as despite being a newcomer here, he already had his own building. The subordinate claimed that this was because the mosquito antidote became very popular, before pointing out the upcoming release of the deer antidote. The villain boss ordered his man to stop stating the obvious. Ma Sang-shik felt quite annoyed, as if it weren't for the orders of the CEO of Yaej Pharmacy, he would have kidnapped Taeju and stolen the formula. But in the end, he had no choice but to follow the orders of Jo Hoon-sok. After a few minutes of lockpicking, the delinquents were finally able to enter the house. The boss urged his man to skip the chat with the target and inject him with the drug that would make his kidnapping very easy. With that, the door was quietly opened. With a syringe in hand, they approached quietly, and once close enough, the criminal decided to make his move. But just as the needle was about to make contact, the hand of the delinquent was suddenly stopped. Taeju, who had been awake the entire time, revealed that at first he wanted to allow the injection. The boss urged his man to stop fooling around and finish the job at once. Yet upon learning that the hand of his subordinate was stuck, the villain syndicate boss was left completely stunned. Taeju began making his move while claiming that he saw them coming from afar, and just like that, before the criminal could even realize it, his target as well as his syringe had disappeared. Taeju had never liked painful little needles. At that point, the criminals began to doubt that their target was a mana reject. With a smug grin, the hero asked the villains if the drug would be as effective if drunk. This insolence and boldness greatly angered the head of the villain syndicate. Only then did something unexpected happen. Their target had willingly drunk the drug. Taeju relished the effects of this medicine, and decided to ask his opponents for more. It had long been known that there was an evil syndicate trafficking drugs in the Free City, and it was obvious that they were being backed by someone from the committee. The product of their trafficking, which was also a poison, was now in the grasp of our protagonist. It was the first time that he had encountered such a poison. Seeing how he was now at the 4th star, the hero could easily handle it, as he started to think of how his master counterpart tried all sorts of drugs back in his day. For that reason, Taeju decided to become a junkie just like him. For the sake of increasing his poison essence, he sucked the drugs out of the opponent's body. After seeing this, the boss of the villain syndicate was left horrified. Taeju demanded to know who was behind all of this. Yet the aggressor refused to answer, fearing for his life. Thus the hero did what needed to be done, making screams echo through the night. As the next day finally arrived, the vigilante captain was thinking while looking outside the window. Kim Taeju, the creator of the miracle drug, had reported a crime. His subordinate confirmed that he had caught gangsters in his house trying to kidnap him, and after uncovering the mastermind, their services were needed. The master immediately realized that the CEO of UJ Pharmacy was behind all of this and began to blame him for his failure. The quickest way to resolve this problem would have been to simply take him in, yet the CEO would obviously be too much trouble. He realized that he had a difficult case at hand, and that his group would have a hard time, as it was tasked with the investigation. For that reason, the captain began to speculate that there was only one option available. Meanwhile, at our hero's residence, as the two owners stood in front of their prisoners, the villain boss found himself in some kind of brain-dead state. At that moment, someone arrived. The vigilantes finally arrived at the scene. Hong Pyo welcomed the master and his crew with open arms. Yet to his utmost shock, he was immediately ignored. The master stood above the gangster, and so as one of the vigilantes tried to keep the old owner away, his captain drew out his sword. The man then resorted to his authority and decided to execute the villain boss here and now. Only then was something thrown at him. The man quickly parried the incoming flying dagger. Taiju demanded to know why the captain was trying to kill the witness. He then showed a video of the villain boss confessing that the CEO of UJ Pharmacy was the one behind the kidnapping and that he wanted to hook the protagonist on drugs. Yet, from the looks of it, he quickly deduced that the captain must be aware of all of this. When asked about his name, the arrogant one claimed to be Taiju. The captain immediately recognized him as the drug developer. He then decided to calm himself down. The Master Awakener then decided to take a better look at the one in front of him, and to his shock, he seemed rather familiar. Only then did he realize he was in front of the same porter from back then. Taiju didn't respond at first. When asked if he was truly behind the mosquito antidote, our hero confirmed it. The swordsman then claimed that it wasn't that impressive. Shortly after, he cracked a smug smile. The captain then firmly affirmed that he was the law in the free city. He decided to give the protagonist one last chance to end things quickly by executing the criminals at once. Even so, Taiju refused. Seeing this, the master dared the mana reject to try and stop the execution. Taiju barely had any time to react. He immediately pulled out his knives and threw them at the captain. The man felt alerted by the incoming projectiles. Thus, he unleashed a tempest of slashes to defend himself. It was now obvious to him that the drug creator had captured the criminals by himself. He couldn't help but commend his skill, seeing how he was able to scratch him. Thus, seeing how he had prevented the execution twice, the standing committee member sentenced Taiju to death. Even so, the protagonist couldn't care less. Yet, as our hero kept running his mouth, he noticed something intriguing. He jumped into the air in order to evade the incoming blade, and threw his knives at his opponent. Taiju was preparing a powerful attack. His opponent was doing the same as well. Only then was the fight interrupted by the arrival of a helicopter. Suddenly men in jumpsuits jumped out of it. The lieutenant general, who made a spectacular entrance, was here to stop the troublesome vigilante captain. Upon jumping out of the helicopter and landing on the ground, the commander stopped the ongoing battle. With the arrival of the military, everyone stood on their guard. The lieutenant general greeted his old acquaintance. Yoonghak demanded to know what the military was doing in the free city. The commander pointed out that he didn't need permission to pay Gaira a visit. The captain accused the military of meddling in the affairs of his city. The powerful awakener clarified that he wasn't there as a lieutenant general. Oh Jinhyung stated that he was there as a civilian. For that reason, he proposed to the other master that they not meddle in each other's affairs. It was safe to say that this greatly angered him. With that being said, the civilian rushed to check on his friend, who affirmed that he wasn't hurt. Even so, some urged him to seek justice. The master-ranked Major General Gu Junyoung claimed that he would take down anyone who mistreated the one who gave them the antidote. Another master rank known as Park Pilsung offered to give him some of his people as bodyguards. The third major, known as Hong Juntae, proposed to get him some medicine. Seeing this, the vigilante captain assumed that Taiju was already acquainted with these powerful brutes from the military, because his father was a brigadier general. Thus he decided to swallow his pride and take his leave. Oh Jinhyung invited him to stay a little longer, but Master Lee affirmed that, unlike them, he was a busy man. However, the soldier stated that he didn't seem busy at all. When asked to elaborate, the lieutenant general called out the vigilante captain on his poor job. Seeing how such delinquents were still running the streets of his city, when offered backup he immediately refused it, and with that the captain decided to take his prisoners and leave. Oh Jinhyung then declared that he would be keeping the delinquents. The committee member took this as military involvement. When confronted about it, the lieutenant general explained that he had to punish them, seeing how they had tried to hurt his friend. Jung Hak tried to invoke the imperial decree, so his opponent decided to adopt a different approach. Oh Jinhyung reminded him that despite the two of them being masters, they were far from being equals. At that moment the captain started to sweat. Oh Jinhyung firmly clarified that the emperor wouldn't care to punish him if he took his life right then and there. As the shivering vigilante explained that there would be consequences, the three other masters started to laugh at him and eagerly awaited the order to rough him up. At that moment Jung Hak realized that he was in a tough situation. Upon seeing his subordinates trembling, he realized that he had no choice. With that being said, he decided to quietly retreat. Oh Jin-hyung noted that the captain had been long pampered inside his own city. With that being said, the hero thanked his savior. The lieutenant general was ready to do anything to help an ally. As it turned out, they had rushed to the scene as soon as they were called by Hong Pyo. And just like that, the worst was evaded. Because of the lieutenant general's involvement, both the protagonist and his business partner came out unharmed. To top it all off, they even got to keep their witnesses. As soon as the delinquents were brought up, Oh Jin-hyung claimed that he would be taking them in order to take down their mastermind, but Taeju tried to clarify that this problem concerned him alone. But the soldier seemed to think otherwise, as the entire military would be in danger if the enemy tampered with the antidote production. He even clarified that the drug creator wasn't forced to deal with the vigilante captain any longer. This made Taeju think about how his fourth-star poison seemed to still be too weak to affect a master. He didn't seem affected by it at all, and if it weren't for the involvement of the lieutenant general, victory wouldn't have seemed as certain as defeat. For that reason, Taeju wanted to acquire more power in order to never be helpless again. Meanwhile, the vigilante captain began to think of how he wanted the hero and the commander dead. Only then did he realize that he had been scratched by the hero's throwing knives. He began to speculate that they were poisonous. At that moment, Jung-hak was struck with a sudden pain. The poison had started to spread. At that moment, he realized that he was in a tough situation. His subordinate quickly noticed that something was wrong, thus he was ordered to get him to a hospital immediately. With that being said, the vigilante stepped on the gas. And just like that, a master had been greatly weakened. Later on, while flying through the air, all the military personnel kept an eye on the prisoners. Fearing for his life, the boss of the villain syndicate promised to tell them everything, but the general affirmed that his testimony wasn't needed. With that being said, he turned to one of his men. The subordinate immediately grabbed the handle and opened the door of the chopper. At that moment, the criminals were filled with fear as the man was ordered to throw them out. And just like that, the 4 criminals met a cold and crushing end. The task had been finished. Junti was then ordered to make the CEO of Yojay Pharmacy meet the same fate. The commander even ordered some troops to be deployed to protect the hero's company. Oh Jin-hyung finally had the opportunity to get closer to Kim Tae-ju. Meanwhile, at the train station, Seyoung received a call from Chang-hoon. The lady told her brother that she had just arrived in the city. It then came as a shock to her to learn that their father's partner had supplied the orphanage with billions of won. And upon learning that he had even finalized his second antidote, Seyoung was left completely stunned, as it turned out that Tae-ju wasn't a scammer after all. With that being said, she ended the call upon entering the taxi. The girl asked the driver to take her home. She was now certain that her return to the city wouldn't be in vain. Later on, at the old owner's orphanage, the children were as lively as ever. Hong Pyo was happy to see one of his little ones arrive. The girl affirmed that she had rushed back home as soon as her father called. Hong Pyo thanked her and asked her to come with him. So-young asked if there was some kind of celebration and was curious about what was in the pot, so the old man claimed it to be spore-poisoned water deer. Upon learning this, she was left particularly stunned. This meant that her brother was being truthful about the antidote, which her father confirmed. Hong Pyo then proposed to go meet up with his business partner, who was expecting her. To keep himself busy, the hero decided to give food to the orphans. With that, the old man decided to proceed with the introductions. Taeju greeted So-young with a smile. However, this wasn't their first interaction. The lady apologized for being rude back then and explained that she was excited to work for their company. The protagonist then felt reassured, as she promised him to do her best in order to improve Taejo. Yet, she wasn't the only one to offer her services. As he was approached by someone, the hero turned an intrigue. That person was Major Do Min-soo, who was assigned to the security of this place along with 19 of his men. The hero was thankful for their kindness, but pointed out how he might not have the space to house 20 soldiers. But the major affirmed that they could take care of themselves. And just like that, Taeju found himself working with the military once again. As the major was invited to join the feast, he was secretly looking forward to the water deer meat. And so he ordered his soldiers to set up everything and go eat. Kim Taeju didn't need to be a loner anymore, as he finally had his own people. Meanwhile, in the castle of the Free City, inside the Autonomous Committee meeting room, the past crimes of the CEO of Yejay Pharmacy were being brought up. When asked if he admitted to his crimes, the man had no choice but to plead guilty. On top of becoming broke, Jo Hoon-sok was now an outcast, his enemy was alive, and the assassin he had hired was unreachable. Things had taken an unexpected turn for the worse. For that reason, the options of the criminal became limited. Jo Hoon-sok had plans to disappear for a while, until things calmed down. Yet, as he was on his way to safety, a red light appeared, and a motorcycle came out from the rear. The man turned to see who was by his left ear, only to find metal breaking the glass near him. With that, the color red appeared. The seats were stained with blood. After carrying out his orders, the assassin decided to return to base. Meanwhile, in the hospital, the vigilante captain was clinging on for dear life. At that moment, his subordinate came in with the requested item. This was a top-grade elixir created by the Mercenary company. The master demanded it immediately. Without wasting any time, he grabbed the sphere and consumed it. And just like that, his veins were purified of the poison. The master didn't expect anything less from the expensive stuff. But only then did something inside him suddenly shatter. And just like that, the one in agony started to curse Kim Tae-bro once again. As the company was growing, its owner realized they needed more drugs, which is why he went to the heart of the mountain to get the giant moon bear's gallbladder. Aside from drugs, he needed to consume new poisons in order to improve his martial arts. After consuming an unfathomable amount of deer poison, the one who had reached the 4th star not long ago was now near attaining the 5th. Only then did he notice something intriguing. Our hero had found the poison sap tree that creates a toxic ooze to keep pests away. That strong poisonous substance had a surprisingly sweet taste. Taiyufo then encountered a blue fire-bellied toad that held poison in its guts. Seeing how it had the same properties as anesthesia, he decided to keep it for research. Soon after, he encountered a giant white wood centipede. The creature, which was as big as a serpent, carried a poison strong enough to terminate an orc with a single bite. Its powerful poison was actually found to be rather refreshing by the martial artist. At that moment, he noticed something in the distance. It was some kind of white symbol hiding in the bushes. Suddenly, the creature revealed itself. The giant moon bear had finally been located. The beast let out a fierce battle roar. Not expecting to encounter it so soon, he decided to test its power. The hero pulled out his flying daggers. He threw them at the creature all at once. The beast deflected them with great ease. Its speed was remarkable. The bear immediately charged at the human. Taeju quickly got behind it and launched a counterattack. At first it seemed like he had scored a direct hit, but the giant moon bear only had to flex its back muscles in order to push the knives out. Taeju then decided to hit it with his blood seal poison palm. The beast remained unfazed and kept on attacking relentlessly. Its claws tore through wood like butter. The hero decided to initiate another skill in order to overpower it, and yet all of his attacks were ineffective. This foe was tougher than predicted, meaning it would be challenging to defeat while only being at the 4th star. Thus, only one solution remained. Taeju needed to acquire more power immediately. He pulled out the blue fire-bellied toad and decided to consume it at once. The centipede followed shortly after. As the venom filled his veins, our hero now simply had to convert it into poison essence. The process was quickly completed. And just like that, the poisonous martial artist finally reached the 5th star. The difficulty of the challenge had now changed. Taeju wanted to use a new toy from the Poison Clan's arsenal, the blood butterflies. The metal insects quickly rushed at the bear. One could only use this hidden art after reaching the 5th star, seeing how it allowed the user to control the trajectory of their projectiles. Because of that, he easily hit the bear in the eye, as well as the left ear. With that, the fight came to an end. Just like that, Taeju was able to slay his target and reach a new level at the same time. With that done, he decided to claim his prize. The hero reached deep into the guts of the monster, and finally acquired the organ that he desperately desired. The gallbladder of the bear was filled with a powerful poison and needed to be coated in energy for a proper extraction. So our hero did just that. Now, with the necessary ingredient in hand, Kim Taeju could finally prepare a new elixir.